Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. This is the fourth part number 4 of my refutation of a single video that was made by David Wood. David Wood has made multiple videos, but these 4 parts are directed against one single video that he has made titled, What Did Muhammad Do When He Saw a Beautiful Woman? This is a mockery video that David Wood has made, as usual, mocking the Prophet Muhammad, and that's all he does. He uses derogatory language and mockery against the Prophet Muhammad. And please listen to the previous 3 parts in my refutation to show the fallacious thinking methods, the fallacies, the pseudological fallacies, the misinterpretations, the lies and deceptions that David Wood employs in his mockery and in trying to deliver a wrong image about Islam and its prophet and its texts. To be able to follow this video, you would have to listen to the previous 3 videos. In that same video that David Wood made and that I'm refuting today, he made another lie, another false claim, where he said, and he's asking his audience, he says, why did Prophet Muhammad specifically go to Zainab when he felt that feeling towards that woman? Why did he specifically go to Zainab to have a sexual relationship with his wife Zainab? Why did he choose Zainab? He says that is because Zainab was a beautiful woman. And then David Wood says, also I'm just quoting David Wood here, he says that Prophet Muhammad always lusted after Zainab and that he destroyed her marriage from his adopted son Zayd so as to marry her. And that is why he was so attracted to her. Number one, Prophet Muhammad was attracted to many other wives of his, and the number one beloved wife of his was Aisha, and all his wives knew that very well about him. So Zainab was not his most beautiful or most beloved wife. Number 2. Yes, Zainab probably was a beautiful woman, but we just don't know the facts about that because we don't have any clear narration describing her. So that's a claim that David Wood makes. She possibly was a beautiful woman, but that's not something bad for the Prophet Muhammad to have a beautiful wife. Anybody can have a beautiful wife. That's not a sin. Number 3, David Wood made a false claim, and it's a lie. And I've responded to that lie in other videos where he says that Prophet Muhammad destroyed her marriage from his adopted son Zayd. Adoption in Islam, adoption was allowed prior to Islam, where someone adopts a person or a son and gives him his name. Then it became, the ruling that came down in the Quran was that your adopted son is not like your real son. He's not like your real son. He's like your brother or someone that you took care of. So if your adopted son divorces his wife, a person can marry her. It is not forbidden. In Islam, it is forbidden for a person to marry the divorced wife of his real son. But it is not forbidden to marry the divorced wife of his adopted son, because in Islam, your adopted son is not like your real son. This is the Islamic law. The third point I would like to make is that it was Prophet Muhammad himself who chose Zainab as a wife for Zayd. So if he was lusting after her, if he was physically attracted to her, he could have married her to himself in the first place. But no, he chose her as a wife for his adopted son Zayd. And then adoption, the ruling with regards to adoption in Islam came down that it is not regarded as your real son. So this Zayd was originally called Zayd, the son of Muhammad. Then he was given back to his old name, Zayd ibn Haritha, Zayd the son of Haritha. So he took back his old name. Zayd and Zainab had marital problems that can happen between any husband and wife. And it is clearly mentioned in the Quran that Prophet Muhammad did his best to make this marriage continue and try to reconcile between them and counsel them. He did this several times and repeatedly and persistently. And that is mentioned in the Quran. And the Quran is the most authentic text that we have. It is actually the most authentic text on earth, actually. And there's no religion on earth that has a text that is as accurate as the Quran. And we can prove that. And we can challenge anybody who, anyone to prove us wrong. But anyhow, so what David Wood resorted to, he'd ignored these texts in the Quran that clearly state that Prophet Muhammad tried his best for that marriage between Zayd and Zainab to continue, but she was the one who did not like Zayd. And it is also clearly mentioned in the authentic narrations that we have that it was Prophet Muhammad who had chosen Zainab for Zayd. He chose that woman as his wife, the wife of Zayd, to be the wife of Zayd. So if he wanted her for himself, he could have had her in the first place. But no, he chose her for Zayd. And he tried to make the marriage continue. But Zainab insisted on getting divorced from Zayd. Then, after she was divorced, God commanded the Prophet Muhammad to marry Zainab, to prove to the people that your adopted son is not like your real son. In Islam, the marriage is considered invalid and is immediately annulled if a man marries the divorced wife of his real son. But for his adopted son, God wanted to show the people that, no, your adopted son is not like your real son. So where did David get that information from? This lie that he presented to the people that Prophet Muhammad destroyed the marriage of Zainab from Zayd and that he lusted over her. He goes to unreliable sources. In Islam, and this is something I would like to educate David about and his viewers, for Islam, for us, we have authentic texts that we rely upon. And these are basically the Quran and the authentic hadiths that have been proven historically to be sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. Anything else beyond that is non-canonical for us, is non-authoritative. We cannot rely upon for any kind of ruling or any kind of information pertaining to our Prophet or our religion. Then we have books of history, such as the history book of At-Tabari, and the history book of Ibn Ishaq. These are history books. They are not books that contain only authentic narrations. They contain fabricated narrations. They contain weak narrations that could not be proven historically. And they also contain authentic narrations. They contain a mixture of everything. Fabrications you will find in there. Weak and unreliable historical narrations you will find in those books. Also, you will find authentic narrations in those books. So Muslim scholars have examined those books and have discerned and determined what is authentic and what is not authentic. So when David Wood wants to make a certain claim and he has a preset view or idea that he wants to give to the people that gives a bad image about the Prophet Muhammad, he avoids the authentic sources and he goes to unauthentic fabricated narrations, and those narrations are in the history book of At-Tabari, the ones that those are fabricated, unreliable historical reports. He goes to them and he says, look, it is mentioned in the history book of At-Tabari. That means nothing to us. It is baseless. It's unfounded. You cannot use that argument against us because we have our authentic sources, and you know that. You know the authentic sources of Islam. And if you wanted to deliver to your viewers authentic information, you would have used these sources. But the authentic sources do not serve your purpose, do not support your idea. So you go to fabricated narrations in the history book of At-Tabari or in the history book of Ibn Ishaq, which is called the life of Muhammad. You go to fabricated narrations in those books and you support your idea with. So basically, this is very shameful of you to deceive your audience. So whenever David Wood makes a claim and brings a narration, please examine it. And before he tries to make any kind of conclusions, extract any conclusions from that text or that historical report, he has to prove if it is authentic and if it is authoritative for the Muslims or is it considered fabricated, or is it considered historically unreliable? So he relied on fabrications to try to give a bad image about the Prophet Muhammad, and this is basically equivalent to a blatant and flagrant lie again. The other point I would like to discuss is the part of the narration that states that the woman comes in the form of a devil and goes in the form of a devil. Now, this is metaphorical. It is not real, and David Wood knows that. In Islam, anything that can affect your relationship with God or distract you from worshiping God or having this connection with God can be described in Islam as a devil. And men are also described as devils if they do any kind of action that can distract someone from his connection with God. We do have hadiths which are sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. Such as this hadith which I will narrate to you. It is in Sunan Ibn Majah, hadith number 1007. The Messenger of Allah said, when any one of you performs prayer, let him pray facing towards a sutra, means something to block him from the people. When you pray and you direct yourself towards Mecca, put in front of you a chair or a pole or something, pray towards a pole so that nobody passes in front of you and cuts your concentration in your invocation with God. So he says, so you try to put something in front of you and let him get close to it, be close to that thing so that you don't block the way of the people who want to pass. And not let anyone pass in front of him. So the person who is praying in Islam should not let anyone pass between him and that thing that he has placed in front of him so as to block this area where he's going to pray to God. So he says, and not let anyone pass in front of him. Let him fight him. And then he says, if someone comes and wants to pass in front of him, let him fight. Doesn't mean fight, but let him prevent him from passing in front of him. Or let him, even if it led to him fighting that person from cutting his prayer, he's allowed to do that if this person insists on cutting the prayer of the Muslim. And then he says, for he is a devil. That person, this man who's trying to pass in front of you and cut your prayer, Prophet, peace be upon him, described him as a devil. Why? Because he is basically interrupting this connection with God. Other narrations also indicate that a person whom the devil can have some form of control over is also called a devil. There's a narration in Sunan Abu Dawud. This hadith is hadith number 2607 in Sunan Abu Dawud. Prophet Muhammad said, a single rider, again talking about a man riding in a trip in the desert. He says, a single rider is a shaitan, which means Satan, means a devil. And a pair of riders are a pair of shaitans, devils. But 3 riders are a company of riders. Why is that? Because it is known that when someone is alone, he is more prone to be enticed by the devil or be attacked by the devil in his religion, meaning his connection with God. But when you're amongst people, the devil does not have such control over you. If someone, for instance, wants to perform a sin such as watching pornography, it would be easier for him, and the devil would have more control over him in enticing him to watch pornography when he's alone. But when it's 2 people, it becomes more difficult. When it's a group of people, it becomes even more difficult because person would feel ashamed of doing something like this in front of the people. So the word devil, when it comes in the texts of Islam, it does not mean that this person is a real devil, but it can mean that this person is exposed to the whispering of the devil, or the devil can use that person to whisper to other people. So basically, when the prophet says that the woman comes in the form of a devil and goes in the form of a devil, it means that the physical attraction of the man towards the woman, towards the opposite sex, is so strong that the devil can easily whisper to the man to look at the beauty and adornment of the woman. This is all it means. It's a metaphorical description of how the devil can make a man lust at a woman. But it does not mean at all that the woman is a devil. And as I showed to you, Prophet Muhammad described other instances and other situations, other people as devils, and they are not real devils. Not only Prophet Muhammad, but Jesus himself described his close disciple, the closest disciple of his, Peter. He described him as Satan. That's in the Bible, in Matthew 16, chapter 16, verse 23. Look at this. Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." He called him Satan. "You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." And that is for the simple fact that Peter was opposing to the idea of going to Jerusalem, while Jesus was in favor of the idea of going to Jerusalem. Just because Peter was opposing to this idea, which was inspired to Jesus by God, so it was God's will for Jesus to go to Jerusalem, but Peter did not want him to go. Just for that fact, Jesus described his closest disciple as Satan. So again, why does David Wood not mention such text to his viewers? That it is mentioned in the Bible, and that Jesus, whom he considers as God himself, or part of the God unit, or the Godhead, why doesn't he tell his viewers and his audience that Jesus described his own disciple, the closest disciple of his, Peter, as Satan? And he only brings those texts that he can use and misuse and misinterpret and basically abuse to mock the Prophet Muhammad or give a bad image about the Prophet Muhammad. This is again deception. This is what is called, again, it has a name, it's a pseudological fallacy. It is a distorted way of thinking that is unacceptable philosophically and unacceptable from the point of view of critical thinking. It is called, again, the cherry picking fallacy. When you choose, or the deliberate ignorance, the deliberate ignorance fallacy. When you choose to ignore and act as if you don't know the other texts that do not support the idea that you want to force into the people and shove down their throats. Other fallacies that David Wood has employed and utilized in this single video was what is called the big lie technique. David Wood in his videos keeps on repeating the same lies over and over again, thinking that if he keeps on repeating them, then that proves that they are true. This is called the big lie technique, and you can read about these pseudo-logical fallacies or logical fallacies. The big lie technique, which is also called proof by assertion. He thinks that if he continues to assert the same lie over and over again, people will believe it as a fact. And that is enough as a proof that you keep on lying and lying and lying, then it becomes a fact in the mind of people. It's also called staying the message fallacy. These are all names for this same technique that David Wood employs and utilizes. Also, the straw man fallacy. The straw man fallacy is when you depict a wrong picture about someone, a horrible picture about someone, and that person is basically totally innocent from that picture. This picture is totally distant from the reality. But because the reality is so beautiful, and you want people to hate that person, what do? You try to depict another false, horrible picture, and you start attacking that picture. That's what David Wood does. This is a technique that he always utilizes to attack the Prophet Muhammad. He gives you a totally false picture based on lies, deception, and misinterpretation of texts, and then he wants people to hate that straw man. But the real figure that he's attacking is totally different from the picture that he has shown to the people or depicted to the people. And then giving lies and making them as truth, as I mentioned, is also called alternative truth fallacy. That is when he uses fabricated texts and ignores the authentic texts and gives you the fabrications and the unreliable historical texts as the facts and ignores the authentic texts, which are really the facts. He totally ignores them and deliberately fails to mention them to his viewers. Another technique that he utilizes and employs is called the mind projection fallacy, where he has a specific image about a person, so he misinterprets the actions of that person based on his own defects. For instance, if someone has a problem with lusting about women, then he sees someone talking to a woman, so he starts projecting and saying, oh, he likes this woman, he's attracted to her. That is your own mind. Because you have that kind of problem, you project it on other people's behavior. And this is exactly what David Wood is doing about the Prophet Muhammad. Even when the Prophet Muhammad kissed his grandchildren, Hassan and Hussein, he kissed them in the mouth, on the mouth. And that is normal. These were young children, young kids, and these are his grandsons. Out of love and mercy, Prophet Muhammad would kiss them, either on the cheek or on their lips. And then David Wood says, this is pedophilic behavior. How can you describe this as pedophilic behavior? He's talking about his own grandchildren, he's playing with them and being merciful and kind to them, and you call this pedophilic behavior. Anyhow, these lies are repeated throughout his videos, the mind projection fallacies. Also, something called the weasel wording fallacy, when you use a word that is ambiguous, or you bring a word that is ambiguous in a text and you try to misinterpret it and give a wrong image and a wrong message to the people. This video has already taken 22 minutes, so I will have to stop here. But please listen to this whole series of 4 videos refuting a single video that David Wood has made about that he called "What Did Muhammad Do When He Saw a Beautiful Woman?" Yes, it took me 4 videos to refute a single video that I think his video was like 12 minutes, and I've refuted it in 4 videos. Each one was no short than 14 minutes, and this one is more than 22 minutes. That is because I'm presenting facts. I'm presenting true texts. I'm not presenting lies. To make a lie or false claim is so easy. You don't need time to make that. But to give people facts and true information, you need to explain and provide quotations that are referenced, and that's what I'm doing, and that is why it's taken so long. Thank you for watching again.